everyone to Inside Scoop with the Fraudster. This is brought to you by LP Magazine, and I'm your host, Stephanie Hoover. Today is part 2 of our podcast series where we have in-depth conversations with former fraudsters, talk about their methods and any trends on how to prevent fraud. So we hope you enjoy this series. If you don't already subscribe, please go to our website and sign up for our free daily e-newsletter and our free print magazine. You can find us at losspreventionmedia.com and just click on the subscribe button. Our goal here is to bring you high quality content that helps you in your loss prevention career. So last episode, we talked with Alexander Hall, who's with Dispute Defense Consulting, about self-checkout fraud and related gift card fraud. Alex, thanks for joining us again. It's good to see you.
Thank you, Stephanie. It's always a pleasure. Thank you.
Good. So for those unlucky people who didn't get to see our last episode, which by the way, they can go back and look at it if they want, can you give us a quick bio and what it is that you do now in your current career?
Sure. So I have amassed 16 years of fraud-related experience. 10 of those years were spent operating as a fraudster. I caused a lot of damage. I'm not proud of it. That was across virtually all industries that I encountered. I deployed more methods than have been defined by our collective community, and I was never busted. In 2017, my daughter was born, and it hit that I needed to change my ways and support her potential. So changed my ways and joined fraud prevention. And for the last almost 6 years, I've been working with financial institutions, merchants, in-store, e-commerce, insurance companies, crypto companies, publications, all of the above, to raise awareness around fraud and fraud prevention, as well as to assist in the development of effective fraud prevention strategies that consider every touch point across the customer journey. It's been a lot of fun, and I can't wait to do more.
Great. Yeah, I really enjoyed our talk last time. I think it was eye-opening for sure, to say the least, and looking forward to having more conversations with you. So especially today, I know this one is sort of like in your wheelhouse, right? Credit card fraud. So I know that our audience, we have a lot of different folks that read the magazine and listen to our podcasts. I would think that we have some people who listen in that are probably LP analysts. It could be IT security, really any retail team member that would be looking at exception-based reporting and monitoring for credit card fraud. So in your experience, Alex, can you kind of give us an overview of the different types of credit card fraud that you saw?
Sure. And do you want me to keep it relative to in-store transactions or just across the whole merchantscape?
Yeah, so folks that are going to be listening to this will be also working with e-com. So it'll be both in-store and online. Yeah. Okay.
So let's start with in-store and then grow out to the big wild e-commerce world.
Sure.
When you get a credit card, there are many ways to put through a transaction. So the most basic one that requires the least information would be what I call generated credit card numbers. Credit card numbers that are lists of credit card numbers that are based on one single credit card number. Fraudsters will lop off the last 4, reverse engineer Loon's algorithm, and end up generating a lot of numbers. Now with this, the fraudster only has access to the credit card number and an expiration date that's in the future, not accurate. However, this does apply to many in-store transactions. I don't know if you or any of your audience has experienced this or sees this with their POS, but if there's enough failed attempts at the POS to swipe a card, it'll ask to be manually entered, and then you present the card, and it will, the cashier is supposed to verify the last 4 and then type in the expiration date on the other side of the counter. Right. That's the lowest requirement to put through a transaction. And as I mentioned, if a fraudster gets a hold of a highly valuable account and generates off of it, there's real potential there. So that's the first iteration, using generated card numbers that are embossed to a card, demagnetize the strip using like neodymium magnets that disrupt the mag strip so it doesn't swipe appropriately, and then ask for it to be manually entered. So that'd be the first iteration, and something that was the lowest on the totem pole.
So it's kind of like the entry-level method.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Requires a little bit more knowledge on how to generate credit card numbers, but unfortunately, there's an app for that. There's many apps for that.
Okay.
Yeah. So there's that. Moving forward from there, I was, everyone is semi-familiar with rewriting magnetic strips, getting track data online in the form of dumps, and that's what they're called on the dark web. Get it, use software, an MSR reader writer to rewrite the magnetic strip on any card. This could be a gift card, this could be a hotel key, this could be a loyalty card, it could be a gift card, it could be another credit card. Anything that has a 3-track magnetic strip on it can be written with payment information, financial institution payment track data. We can go down that rabbit hole, but on the surface, the track data comes out, it gets represented in a document, copy and paste into a very specific software, use an MSR reader writer to write to the card, and then go shopping. The thing with this is, if you get a hold of good track data that you can confirm a high dollar amount in the bank account, you might make 5 or 10 of the same exact cards and go over the course of 1 hour and hit 5 or 10 stores
Before it's caught, right? Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Try to beat the clock in that sense. So there's that. It does not require an embosser, because consider, how often does someone swipe a card and the cashier is taking the card to look at it? It's not very often that happens. Right. Someone walks up, goes to checkout, swipes the card, leaves. The last one is something that the last one for in-store purchases is something that I wasn't able to figure out when I was a bad guy, and that's rewriting the tap chips, so the NFCs or the EMVs or whichever the acronym is for that. I didn't come across that. However, I've seen in the community, people are talking about rewriting those tap chips. I don't have any insight for that, but that's definitely something we should be looking into, seeing what's involved with that.
So let's kind of break it up into 2 halves. We'll talk about in-store first, and then because it's a lot, right, to process. And what's popping into my head as you're talking is, like, do I have to have a degree from MIT to be able to do this? Like how readily available is this information out there for somebody who's motivated?
Immediately. It's immediately available. I learned everything I learned from a quick Google search, and after seeing a few instructional manuals on the dark web, or what had filtered down to me from the dark web, people through trial and error document what they've seen and how they did the thing, the method, whatever it was, and I would take that information, Google up any gaps in the information, and it's immediately available. If anybody, yourself or anybody wants to look up what Loon's algorithm is, it's immediately there. It's called the modulus 10, the mod 10, so on and so forth. In addition to that, the equipment, and we'll get into this later, I expect, but the equipment is not hard to get to do the work. Like an embosser is not hard to get, because they have to be sold to different issuing institutions. They have to be sold to different companies. And the reader writer as well, they have to be able to write these loyalty cards. So it's the hardware, the expertise, the knowledge is all available readily for individuals looking to operate in fraud.
Are there some different social groups that people kind of like go to online to like get the latest on this, or to share within the different types of fraud groups?
Based on what the answer is yes, though I didn't interact with them. I don't know what other people are doing or what other people were doing. I only know what I was, how I was operating and how I delegated. But I know the social groups exist. The dark web's full of them. There's also this thing called scam rap. It's a new genre of music where rappers are talking about how to commit fraud and how to commit scams and all of that stuff. And they're actually using that as a recruitment method to get people who are money mules or will create mule accounts with their own identities, all these different things.
Wow.
So the social aspect is definitely there. But as far as staying up to date on these trends, there really is no up to date, because
it changes.
Everything's the same. Right.
Okay.
Well, I mean, everything's the same. Like, think about the anatomy of a credit card. With the adaptation of the tap, aside from the tap adaptation or adoption, nothing has changed. And so this is another thing that I should mention for in-person transactions. it was regular practice to get an EMV enabled chip or a tap card, right?
Mhm.
And take a ice pick or something to the chip so that way it wouldn't read, right? So
Okay.
then you put it in the reader and it fails, and then you have to revert back to the strip. For cards that only have the strip and you want to use for generated card numbers to type it in manually entered,
Mhm.
you'd use 2 neodymium magnets to demagnetize the strip. It would fail to swipe, and then it would have to be typed in. Yep.
So it doesn't sound like it would even take a big group to do this. It's basically a person who's interested in finding it online and motivated, then orders some equipment, maybe enlists a couple people to go out and use the cards. I mean, to me, it doesn't sound like a great big organized cabal, right?
It does
Yeah.
not have to be.
Yeah.
From 0 to 100, based on the cost of the hardware when I was operating, $600 will get you up and running. And the problem is those pieces of hardware can be carded themselves. So 2 transactions in the e-commerce space using stolen credit card details can get you the hardware that you need to get started, and it's only $600. And then you got to get the resources that, like the cards and things like that. And then it's just a bunch of research, and the research, you only have to do it once. It persists throughout time, because as track data, gets employed at one store and then elsewhere, or maybe the manual transaction, the manual entry method goes through, and that merchant catches on and stops manually entering, well, then they just step over to the same place. So the same method can be applied. That's something that I call the perpetual nature of fraud, because the same method can be applied across any number of places until they catch on individually.
Right. And even then, I gotta imagine at some point, unless they do something systemically to fix it, they're gonna let their guard down. If you're relying on people, you can still cycle back to that same retailer if they've caught on. They may forget about it in a year, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yes.
Yeah. So I'm thinking about, on a daily or the weekly basis, like the sort of the activity level with this. Again, I know it wouldn't take a big group. So would this be something that would happen like on a daily basis? Is it, what was sort of the pattern with it? On the weekends or whenever?
What I was familiar with was fraud paid for everything. You needed gas in your car, you needed cigarettes from the gas station, you needed food from a restaurant, you needed a place to operate out of, you needed a car to drive. Fraud handled all of it. And there's a big distinction between fraudsters that are seeking to just get what they need versus the people who are looking to cash out, build a bankroll. The people who just get what they need, they live their life with fraud. They're not going after huge transactions. They need cigarettes, they go get cigarettes, and that's it. The chargeback isn't going to happen while they're in store. Yeah, so there's everything in between those two. The people who are just ordering food to feed their family or their friends and stuff like that, all the way out to the people that are using generated cards to get into hotel rooms and go shopping at the luxury shops, in Vegas, downstairs to pick up $30,000 Rolexes and things. So it's everything in between.
Yeah, so I think, especially my days in LP, we used to look at things like, okay, are there trends around times or trends around day of the week? It sounds like it's really just all over the place. Yeah.
And especially in Las Vegas, the culture, the community that I was exposed to, drug use and fraud went hand in hand. So, I mean, they were operating for 36 hours a day.
Right. That's a long day. Yeah. So is there anything as far as legal deterrence that you feel like that somebody who's a fraudster that's into credit card fraud, like, oh, I'm not going to go over this level because I'm afraid of getting caught, or I might have this penalty placed on me? Any of that factor into this, or is it just not a non-factor?
The biggest, scariest thing, and I don't know if I mentioned this during our initial session, but the scariest thing for me was, so I spent plenty of time in jail for traffic stuff, like speeding and insurance and whatever it was, like just stupid traffic stuff. While I was in there, I heard horror stories of people that would go and commit theft, fraud, well, theft and fraud for in-store retailers. And specifically, there were two merchants that would build a case on the bad behavior. And then when that person entered the store again, before they had a chance to do anything, they were detained and brought to a back room. This whole file was built up, a disk and a worksheet and all this stuff. Local law enforcement came, popped in, took them away, and then they had everything that they needed to prosecute. Yeah, sorry.
Right. Yeah, I think, yeah, we did talk about that a little bit, and I agree with you. There are certain retailers that do a really good job with building their case and following through and prosecuting. But we hear a lot that, you know, district attorneys' offices they're stretched thin and they're less likely to prosecute, and that it's adding to the amount of crime that's happening out there. And I just wondered if you've seen an effect like that, or if it's, again, people are afraid because they think they're going to get caught still. Just your opinion on that.
I don't think there is a fear of getting caught. I'll tell you, it happens plenty. Like the fear was there for me. But generally speaking, knowing about the number of people who are operating in fraud and theft and all of that, and seeing the percentage that got busted, if you had to calculate a ratio, relatively, nobody got busted. Yeah, so right. There's the fear of getting busted is not there. Okay. And then because of what you had said, the law enforcement is getting stretched thin. They have bigger things to deal with than someone stealing, you know, an iPod or you know, an MP3 player or whatever it may be that they could fit in their pocket. They're not worried so much about that, right? And so when they go to jail, they get kicked out in 2 weeks for what was 1% of $100,000 crime spree. They got busted for 1% of it, went to jail and got kicked out again because they needed to make room for this person that just committed a violent offense or something like that. So that it doesn't deter them when they spend time in jail. It was a running joke whenever I was operating, when I would go down for these traffic warrants and things like that. I'd post to my Facebook, "Hey man, I'm going on vacation, see you in a little bit." Like,
just taking a break.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and to your point, you know, I think law enforcement is very focused on crime that's associated with violence, and this is sort of, it's just corporate America, right? That's paying the price. So it's kind of like almost like a victimless crime. So, yeah, I hear you. I think it is something that we talk about as a group among LP, that we definitely need stronger penalties to deter a lot of this behavior. But even after that, so let's dive back into, and we'll stick with the in-store fraud, right? What do you think are some of the, besides those companies that are following up and building a case file, what are some of the systemic things that they can do to stop this type of fraud? It's just focusing on in-store.
I would say, so because the easiest method to employ would be to bypass the magnetic stripe or the tap to pay and go down to manual entry. I would say that heavily scrutinize anyone that's looking to leverage that. I would assume that across the entire landscape, the people who need to have their cards entered manually, the rule is it's going to be fraudulent. The exception is it's really going to be someone with a genuine customer with a failing card. So for those methodologies, I would be very, very suspicious of them. And just verify it, because somebody is like, I can't manually enter your card until I verified you have your ID in your card. Cool, thank you. All right. The 10 people that you encounter that are genuine customers are going to be like, yeah, we're moving away from the norm. Yeah, sure, here's my card. I would expect for them to be a little bit more understanding. Whereas fraudsters, they'll have to step up their game, because they'll have to get an ID that matches. They'll have to emboss the card to match the ID. They couldn't hand those cards out to different people. You wouldn't be able to do all of that stuff. So it would help deter that level. Again, that's the lowest. Moving up from there, I don't want to say this, but it's kind of difficult. We don't verify information at checkout. You know, when someone swipes a card and it goes through, it's there.
Yeah, we want frictionless payment, right? That's what we're all about.
Yeah, and for now the rule flips. The rule is the vast majority of the people who are swiping their card correctly are good, genuine customers. The exception is fraudsters are successfully swiping cards. So to apply a systemic rule to all of it, you'd be alienating a lot of good customers. And so one thing that works to the benefit of people that are in store is you can see behaviors, you can have access to psychological engagements, things like that. So if it's Walmart and you see some guy that looks, not that I would promote profiling anybody, but this guy doesn't look like he should be buying $10,000 worth of TVs, like
right.
maybe think about that a little bit. Yeah, but that's dicey territory, and I can understand why certain things haven't been rolled out en masse.
Yeah, in fact, we talked about this last time too. It sounds like human intervention, good old human intervention, is really what's going to make the difference, and especially with in-store, just stopping this. I'm just wondering about the CVV on the back of the cards. Does that play into any of this? We haven't really talked about that.
So when you do, at least what I had experienced with the manual entry, they don't ever request CVV. I never ran into one where it was manually entered, requesting CVV. Sometimes it would request the billing zip, but for a fraudster, using foreign cards that don't subscribe to the traditional 5-digit billing zip, like I think Canada uses alphanumeric and it's 6 digits. For foreign cards, fraudsters are aware that you just type in 00000 and it bypasses.
Okay.
So CVV does not come into play for that method. CVV does not come into play for track data. There is a CVV embedded in the track data. I think it's track 1 or track 2 has a CVV in the track data, but it's not the same represented on the physical card. CVV is more so reserved for e-commerce. Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah. So
or mail order, telephone orders. That's another caveat to this. It's kind of in the middle of in-store and e-commerce. If you can call in an order, they'll ask for the billing zip and the CVV, process the order, and you go pick it up. So that it'll come into play there.
Right. So buy online, pick up in store, right? And I know that's one of the areas that our audience was concerned about as well with that type of fraud. So we talked about the features of the card. And before we move on off of in-store, I just want to talk about and back up to the apps you mentioned that help generate is it an algorithm? Is it, I know you've mentioned, what is it called? Boons? I don't remember what the algorithm, what you said it was.
It's I believe it's pronounced Loons. It's LUHN.
Okay.
Loons algorithm. It's also called the Mod 10 and the Modulus 10.
Okay.
And the checksum. Lots of different names for it.
Yeah, right. So you can actually download an app, and then this app will help you navigate through this process. And so that blows my mind.
So say a fraudster's sitting at a desk and he has a card that is a corporate T&E card from, name big bank here and big company there. Cool. So it's a big, powerful card. Well, this card has been used, whether it's e-commerce or swiped to death and it's just burnt and canceled. This card's no longer valuable. Well, fraudsters are resourceful. They lop off the last 4 of the 16 digits or the last 3 of the 15 if it's Amex. Lop those off and type in the 12 remaining digits into this app and hit the button generate. Well, that app is designed to generate every possible combination for the remaining digits up to 16 or up to 15 if it's Amex that meet Loon's algorithm. So then what happens is the fraudsters will go through and they'll call merchant account services like running authorizations like we saw in Night at the Roxbury. Chris Kattan's character was calling in authorizations. Just call hour after, for an hour, just go through and check which numbers will run for authorizations for $1, circle them, and then go emboss those to cards, take them into stores, and hopefully get someone to enter it manually. So that's the whole process.
This is somebody physically sitting on the phone calling in. So it's amazing to me that there's not a system in place to catch that behavior, because if you've got calls coming in from the same number over and over again. Wouldn't that be an easy way to stop that?
I've spoken with merchant service accounts managers or account managers, whatever it is, and asked them, like, do you ever get just a flood of people calling in and verifying numbers? And they said, yes, there's actually several places in the United States where people's entire job is to do real authorizations.
Okay.
And it's just a constant flow from one number. So then I said, well, what about if you isolated the requests by BIN number? Because if I'm generating off of one credit card number, I'm requesting an authorization on one BIN number forever. And they said they'd look into it, but we haven't continued that conversation. I think that would be the way to catch that.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Okay. So anything else that you want to enlighten us on with in-store fraud? It's fascinating to me.
I think that there's still the potential. Oh, so speaking of apps, anything that allows you to store credit card details in an app and then use it at checkout was something that was heavily exploited out here years ago. I don't know if it's still in operation, but I knew of one operation that was doing that.
Okay.
I don't know if I should name them, but yes, there was the opportunity to create an app that matches the merchant, and you were able to store credit card details in the account, and then in store, what they were doing was taking gift cards and buying gift cards and loading up prepaid gift cards that were branded using the app. So then, they just go from store to store to store to store to store, running through the process. So that's interesting. That's another way to use credit cards, is to link it to an app and then use that for payment during self-checkout.
Yeah, it seems more legit, right? Like if I was a cashier, I wouldn't question it probably.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, unless you're sitting there with 10 cards, changing. Yeah.
Then I should.
Some people are brazen. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, to me, if I'm working a self-checkout and I see somebody with a stack of gift cards, I should be over observing what's happening, saying hello, checking in. I think that's pretty basic.
Absolutely.
So we're again backing up, because these questions are popping into my head. I'm just wondering, where are they typically getting the cards? Are they dumpster diving? Are they fishing out of mail? Like, where are they getting the original card?
Ooh, anywhere. So again, going across the spectrum, the gradient, the lowest one is to generate credit card numbers. Okay. Next up would be to get the information probably from the dark web forum. That's relatively easy. A crypto bank account, dark web forums, get that. Moving up from there would be submitting credit card applications with profile information, and then intercepting the credit card and activating it yourself. The fraudsters, which that's a huge elaborate thing, all predicated on identity theft. So like, that's a huge process, but that is where it ends up. And that's how you get a hold of $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 cards. Yeah, those are probably the main ones. And then of course, physical theft, if someone somewhere leaves the purse unattended in a car or something, the bad guys will grab it and use it that way. Yeah, those are probably the main ones.
The good ones, right? The ones that are pretty easy, I guess. Okay, so how much time do we have? Why don't we do this? Why don't we talk a little bit more about what it is that your company does to prevent in-store, right? Or to consult on in-store, and then we can save e-com for our next episode, because I feel like I want to spend lots of time on that. So talk to us a little bit about what you guys do at your consulting firm.
So thank you. We offer training and consulting all around fraud. And so that breaks down into a couple of ways. For in-person, in-store commerce, that would be all around identifying counterfeit materials, whether it's cash, card, check. It would be becoming familiar, like we're doing with these exercises here. It'd be to be familiar with the methodologies that are in play, so on and so forth. Training how to identify these things when they're in play. There's that for in-store, and then consulting would be to assist in the development of software, policies, procedures that will help to facilitate stopping the bad guys, just all the way around. So one's around education, the other one's around actually driving ROI and strengthening some security practices.
Right. Yeah.
Moving over into e-commerce counterpart, it's more the same, but the subject matter is different because there's training around e-commerce fraud. And then we have to move over into website fraud, you know, how these people are interacting with the website and where they get to approach and calling the call center and employing social engineering. The world just expands insanely, right? So there's a lot more touch points. There's a lot more to consider. Yeah, everything from chargebacks to transaction analysis, leveraging automation, everything. There's a lot to talk about and a lot to do.
Yeah, for sure. There's job security. No lie. Yeah. So what I'm thinking we can do is for our next episode, I would love to encourage the audience to submit some questions. And it could be about this episode. It could be about the last one. It could be about e-com, which we'll talk about next time. But when we release this podcast episode, we're going to include a link where they can submit their questions, and then we can get back together and answer those. So I'd love to hear what our audience is wondering about as well. So, all right, this has been great. And I just want to thank you again, Alex, and look forward to talking with you some more. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much.